In a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and fertile fields, there lived a wealthy man named Jacob. He was a kind and just father to his two sons, Ethan and Levi. While Ethan, the elder, was steadfast and dutiful, the younger son, Levi, was restless and ambitious. From a young age, Levi had always been different. He had an insatiable curiosity, an eagerness to explore beyond the familiar landscapes of his father's estate. He often asked travelers about the distant lands they had visited, their cultures, the foods they ate, and the marvels they had witnessed. The stories filled him with wonder and an unquenchable thirst for adventure. Unlike his elder brother, who found fulfillment in the stability of home, Levi felt constrained. The routine of tending livestock, managing crops, and overseeing laborers felt like a slow suffocation to him. He longed for the unknown, for excitement, for a life beyond the boundaries of the village where he had been born and raised. One evening, as the golden sun dipped below the hills, casting an amber glow over the land, Levi sat outside, deep in thought. The village festival was in full swing, with music and laughter filling the air. But even amidst the joy, he felt a yearning that nothing could satisfy. He knew what he wanted, but he hesitated. The next morning, with determination in his heart, he approached his father, Jacob, who was seated beneath the great oak tree in the courtyard, reading an old scroll. "Father," Levi said, his voice steady but filled with urgency, "I have something to ask of you." Jacob set down the scroll and looked at his son with gentle eyes. "Speak, my son. What troubles your heart?" Taking a deep breath, Levi knelt before his father. "I want my share of the inheritance now. I do not wish to wait until you are gone. I want to go into the world and seek my own fortune, to live my own life." Jacob's heart grew heavy with sorrow. He saw the eagerness in Levi's eyes, but also sensed the folly in his request. He knew that the world was not as kind as Levi imagined, that the comforts of home were not so easily replaced. But Jacob also knew that some lessons could only be learned through experience. Ethan, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Levi, how can you ask such a thing? Our father has given us everything we need. Why would you want to leave the safety of home?" Levi turned to his brother, his expression resolute. "Ethan, I do not want to live in the shadow of another. I need to find my own path." Jacob sighed, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "If this is truly what you desire, I will not stand in your way. But know this, my son, wealth is fleeting and the world is not always kind. Choose your path wisely." With a solemn nod, Jacob divided his wealth and gave Levi his portion. It was a significant amount, enough to build a prosperous life if spent wisely. But wisdom was something Levi had yet to acquire. Levi, thrilled by his newfound riches, wasted no time in leaving the village. He packed his belongings, donned the finest garments he could afford, and set out before the first light of dawn. As he walked away, Jacob stood at the gates, watching his son disappear into the horizon, whispering a prayer for his safety and wisdom. Levi's heart raced with excitement as he journeyed beyond the familiar fields and into the unknown. The road stretched before him, leading to new places, new faces, and new experiences. His dreams of grandeur were finally within reach, and he felt unstoppable. But little did he know, the world outside was not as forgiving as the home he had left behind. Levi traveled to a distant city, a dazzling place teeming with life and extravagance. Towering structures adorned with intricate carvings lined the bustling streets, while marketplaces overflowed with exotic goods from all corners of the land. The scent of spices and roasting meats filled the air, blending with the laughter and chatter of merchants and noblemen alike. Levi, with his pockets full of wealth, quickly attracted attention. He bought the finest clothes embroidered with gold and silk, and adorned himself with jewels fit for royalty. He spent his days exploring the lavish entertainment of the city, grand feasts, theatrical performances, and mesmerizing dances performed by the most skilled artists. Before long, Levi was known among the city's elite. He hosted opulent feasts in his rented estate, inviting musicians, poets, and men of influence. His wealth granted him a place at the tables of the powerful, and his charm made him a favorite among the revelers. At first, Levi felt invincible. Each night was a celebration, filled with music, fine wine, and indulgence. The people around him praised his generosity, raising their glasses to his success. The pleasures of the city dulled his thoughts of home, replacing them with a fleeting sense of fulfillment. However, Levi did not notice how his fortune was steadily dwindling. Gold and silver slipped through his fingers like sand, fueling his endless pursuit of pleasure. The very people who had surrounded him, who had praised him and called him friend, were the same ones who encouraged him to spend recklessly, indulging in every excess the city had to offer. Months passed, and soon the weight of his spending became impossible to ignore. His once overflowing coffers grew alarmingly light. The once friendly merchants who had provided him with luxuries now demanded payment. His lavish home, once filled with guests, now felt eerily empty. Then, disaster struck. A great famine swept through the land, leaving the city in turmoil. The markets that had once brimmed with food now stood bare. The wealthiest of men hoarded their resources, while the poor and destitute begged in the streets. Levi, who had once thrown feasts of abundance, found himself struggling to afford even a morsel of bread. Desperate, he turned to those he had once called friends, but they had vanished like shadows. They had taken what they could from him and moved on, seeking new benefactors. Those who had once sung his praises now ignored his pleas for help. Levi wandered the streets, hunger gnawing at his stomach, regret weighing down his soul. He realized, too late, the fleeting nature of the riches he had once believed would last forever. He had exchanged a life of stability and love for empty pleasures that abandoned him in his time of need. One evening, exhausted and starving, he found himself on the outskirts of the city, where the land was barren and desolate. It was there that he met a farmer who kept a herd of pigs. Humiliated and desperate, Levi begged for work. The farmer, seeing his pitiful state, took pity on him. "You may feed my swine," he said, "but do not expect much in return. The land is scarce and food is hard to come by." Levi accepted, though shame burned within him. He, who had once worn garments of gold, now labored among the lowest of animals. As he dropped to his knees in the filth, watching the pigs eat, he realized that he was so hungry that even their food looked tempting. The work was grueling, the pay meager, and the shame unbearable. He, who once dined in golden halls, now longed to eat even the pods the swine consumed. In those lonely, bitter moments, he began to reflect on his choices. He remembered the warmth of his father's house, the kindness of the servants who never went hungry, and the peace he had taken for granted. He had traded a life of security and love for fleeting pleasures that left him empty. One cold night, as he lay beneath the open sky, his heart filled with remorse. "Even my father's servants live better than this," he murmured. It was in that moment of despair that a thought pierced through the fog of his regret. "I will return to my father. I do not deserve to be called his son, but perhaps he will take me back as a servant." "Even my father's servants have more than enough to eat," he whispered. "And here I am, starving." For the first time in months, Levi thought of home, not of wealth or adventure, but of warmth, of kindness, of a father's love. Tears welled in his eyes as he resolved to return, even if it meant returning in shame. With renewed determination, he rose to his feet, brushed the dust from his tattered garments, and began the long journey home. Levi walked for days, his body weak from hunger and exhaustion. The sun beat down on him during the day, and the cold night air sent shivers through his frail frame. His once proud stride was now slow and unsteady, and every step felt heavier than the last. But he pressed forward, driven by a deep longing for home, for the warmth of his father's embrace, and for the peace he had so recklessly abandoned. As he neared the lands of his childhood, memories flooded his mind. He remembered the mornings spent with his father in the fields, the laughter he had shared with Ethan, and the simple joys of home-cooked meals and warm shelter. Shame clawed at his heart, for he had turned his back on all of it, in pursuit of fleeting pleasures. Doubts crept into his mind as he approached the familiar outskirts of the village. Would his father even recognize him? Would he welcome him back, or would he turn him away? He had squandered everything, betrayed the trust and love given to him, and returned with nothing but regret. "I do not deserve to be his son," Levi murmured, "but perhaps, if I beg, he will allow me to be one of his servants." His father's servants lived far better than the life he had been leading. Even the lowest among them had food to eat and a place to sleep. Levi resolved to humble himself. to cast aside any remnants of pride, and to seek only mercy rather than restoration. Little did he know, Jacob had never stopped watching for his return. Every evening, he would stand at the edge of his fields, scanning the horizon, hoping to see the silhouette of his lost son. And on that fateful afternoon, as the sun painted the sky with hues of gold and crimson, he saw a lone figure in the distance, walking hesitantly towards the village. Jacob's heart leapt. He recognized the gait, the posture, and the longing in those weary eyes. Without hesitation, he ran forward, his robes billowing in the wind, his heart pounding with overwhelming emotion. Levi, upon seeing his father rushing toward him, fell to his knees, tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. He could hardly believe what he was witnessing. This was not the reaction he had expected. He had envisioned anger, rejection, or at best indifference. But instead, his father was running to him with open arms. "Father," Levi choked out, his voice trembling with emotion. "I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me as one of your servants." But Jacob did not let him finish. He pulled his son into a tight embrace, holding him as though he would never let go. "My son," he exclaimed, his voice thick with tears. "You were lost, but now you are found. You were dead, but now you live." Jacob called his servants to bring the finest robe, a ring for Levi's finger, and sandals for his feet. He commanded that the fatted calf be prepared for a grand feast. The household rejoiced, for the prodigal son had returned. Levi could scarcely believe it. He had come expecting rejection, but instead he found grace. He had prepared a plea for mercy, but was met with unconditional love. The weight of his shame lifted, replaced by the warmth of his father's embrace and the knowledge that he was truly home. And so, the road to redemption led Levi not to servitude, but to restoration. His father had never stopped loving him, never ceased longing for his return. It was a love greater than his failures, a love that welcomed him back not as a servant, but as a son. The household was abuzz with excitement as preparations for the feast commenced. The finest linens were brought out, the grand hall was adorned with fresh flowers, and the scent of roasting meat filled the air. Servants hurried about, setting tables with golden goblets and the most exquisite dishes, for tonight was a night of unparalleled joy. Levi, still in disbelief, stood by his father's side, watching in awe as the celebration took form. He had expected rejection, a cold reception, or at best a place among the servants. But instead he was honored as a beloved son. A fresh robe now adorned his weary body, the ring on his finger symbolizing his restored place in the family, and the sandals on his feet signified his dignity and belonging. As guests began to arrive, laughter and music filled the air. Old friends and family members, many of whom had heard of Levi's departure and assumed he would never return, now gathered to celebrate. Some were joyful, while others murmured in hushed tones, questioning whether he truly deserved such a grand welcome. Among those who watched from a distance was Ethan, the elder son. His heart was heavy, and a storm of emotions raged within him. He had remained loyal. He had worked tirelessly for their father, and yet never had such a feast been held in his honor. Bitterness clawed at his heart as he observed the celebration from the shadows. Jacob, sensing his elder son's absence, stepped away from the feast and found Ethan standing outside, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "My son, why do you not join us?" Jacob asked gently. Ethan's jaw clenched. "All these years I have served you faithfully. I have never disobeyed you. Yet not once have you given me so much as a young goat to celebrate with my friends. But this son of yours who squandered everything is honored with the greatest feast. How is this fair?" Jacob sighed, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Oh, my son, you have always been with me, and everything I have is yours. But today we must rejoice. Your brother was lost and is found. He was dead and now lives again. This is not about fairness, but about love, mercy, and grace." Ethan looked into his father's eyes and saw the depth of his love, not just for Levi, but for him as well. He understood that their father's love was not something to be earned, but freely given. He felt his resentment wane, replaced by a quiet understanding. Inside, the music swelled, and the laughter of the guests grew louder. Levi, though still humbled by the overwhelming grace he had received, began to feel something he had not felt in years: joy. He knew now that love was not something to be purchased or deserved, but given freely, without condition. As the evening wore on, the feast became more than just a celebration of Levi's return. It became a testament to the boundless love of their father, Allah, a love that had the power to restore, redeem, and unite. The prodigal son had come home, and in doing so he had found not only forgiveness, but a renewed understanding of his father's heart. And so, under the glow of lanterns and the warmth of family, the prodigal son sat with his father and brother, no longer burdened by shame or guilt, but embraced by the grace that had always been waiting for him. The morning after the great feast, the household still buzzed with lingering joy. Servants cleaned the remnants of the celebration, while family members reminisced about the long-lost son who had returned. Yet for Levi, the true weight of his journey was only now settling in. As he walked through the familiar halls of his childhood home, he felt both comfort and unease. The past still clung to him, whispering of his mistakes, but the warmth of his father's embrace and the kindness in his eyes reminded him that he had been given a second chance. The question remained, what would he do with it? Jacob, ever the wise and loving father, noticed his son's quiet contemplation. He found Levi standing in the fields where he once worked before his departure. "My son," Jacob said gently, "you are home, but your heart is still troubled." Levi turned to his father with somber eyes. "Father, I do not understand why you welcomed me back so easily. I failed you. I wasted everything you gave me, and yet you treat me as though I have done no wrong. How can this be?" Jacob smiled softly. "My son, you have indeed made mistakes, but love is not built on worthiness. It is built on grace. Had I let anger guide me, I would have lost you forever. But love is greater than resentment. Forgiveness is greater than punishment." Levi let out a deep sigh. "But what of Ethan? He has always been faithful, yet I see his pain. How do I mend what I have broken?" Jacob nodded knowingly. "Ethan struggles with his own lessons. He believes that love must be earned, but love is given freely. You must show him not just with words, but with your actions, that you are not the same man who left this home. That is how trust is rebuilt." Levi spent the following days working alongside the servants, just as he had done before he left. He did not demand special treatment, nor did he live in the comfort of his past privilege. He labored in the fields, tended to the livestock, and learned once more the value of patience and humility. Ethan, though still wary, observed Levi's efforts. At first he refused to acknowledge them, unwilling to let go of his resentment. But as time passed, he could not deny that his younger brother was changing. The arrogance that once defined him was gone, replaced with a quiet gratitude. One evening, as Levi repaired a broken fence near the fields, Ethan approached. "Why are you working so hard?" he asked gruffly. "You do not need to." Levi wiped the sweat from his brow and met his brother's gaze. "Because I wish to restore what I have lost, Ethan. Not just the wealth, not just the home, but the trust of those I hurt, including you." Ethan studied him for a long moment before sighing. "I was angry," he admitted. "I felt as though everything I did was overlooked. But I see now that Father's love for you did not take away from his love for me. I should have rejoiced, yet I let jealousy cloud my heart." Levi placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. "I understand, and I will spend every day proving to you that I am not the same man who left. I want to be your brother again." Ethan hesitated, but then nodded. "Then let us start again." The two brothers, once divided by resentment and mistakes, began to heal the wounds between them. Over time, Levi grew not just as a man, but as a son and a brother. He learned that love and forgiveness were not things to be taken for granted, but to be cherished and nurtured. He became a steward of the home, not out of obligation, but out of devotion. Through it all, Jacob watched with pride, knowing that both of his sons had learned invaluable lessons, one about grace and the other about the unbreakable bond of family. And so, the story of the prodigal son was not just one of return, but of renewal. Levi had found his way back, not just to his home, but to the heart of those who loved him. And in the end, it was love, above all else, that had truly restored what was lost.